Support WrestleTalk!
Support each other. As the wrestling world continues to mourn the tragic loss of Jon Huber, aka Brodie Lee, AEW management have made the decision to postpone their New Year's Smash events by 1 week in order to pay tribute to the late Lee. Tony Khan said that Dynamite this week will instead feature a special match card dedicated to the leader of the Dark Order, with matches comprised of some of his and his son's favourite performers. Cody Rhodes, Orange Cassidy and Ten will take on Team Taz, the Young Bucks and Colt Cabana will take on Private Party and Matt Hardy, Hangman Page, John Silver and Alex Reynolds will face MJF, Santana and Ortiz, with Anna Jay and Tay Conti versus Britt Baker and Penelope Ford, and Lance Archer, Evil Uno and Stu Grayson against Eddie Kingston, The Butcher and The Blade, rounding things out. New Year's Smash will instead go ahead on January 6th and 13th, with the previously advertised matches of Kenny Omega versus Rey Fenix for the AEW World Championship, Shida versus Abaddon for the Women's Championship, and Jake Hager and Wardlow settling their differences, plus the return of Jon Moxley to AEW screens. WWE also paid their own tributes to Lee during last night's episode of Raw, with some of his catchphrases being used on commentary and in promos, moves being used in homage, and the usual opening graphic. However, Impact star Brian Myers, formerly WWE's Kurt Hawkins, said the tribute wasn't right in a tweet. No 10-bell salute, no video package. This man was beloved by his peers and we're all grieving hard. This isn't right. It's an incredibly rare case in recent wrestling history, as Lee was actively signed to a rival company, but having only just left WWE 1 year ago, he'd worked with and formed close bonds with so many members of the current roster, many of whom paid tribute in their own way on Raw. With Dynamite dedicating its entire show this Wednesday to Lee, some online would like to see WWE follow up with a video package of their own on SmackDown this Friday. From everything we've seen across social media, all the stories coming out, the Being the Elite tribute, everybody was richer for having known Brodie Lee. He seemed to be a character who earned empathy, friendship, and respect, as shown by the AEW roster when learning of his illness. Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful is reporting that after speaking with members of the AEW roster, many of them had been informed of Lee's illness and severity as far back as early November, but they were asked to keep the news quiet out of respect for Lee and his family, which they did until his passing this Saturday. I'd just like to echo what Laurie said yesterday in the news and say that the WrestleTalk family sends our deepest condolences to Lee's family and friends at this difficult time. And now it's time for a review of last night's episode of Raw in about 5 minutes. Following their 6-man tag match on last week's show, Drew McIntyre, Sheamus, and Keith Lee all shared the ring for the opening segment, where Lee and Sheamus both made their claims for the #1 contendership to the WWE Championship, which culminated in a match for precisely that accolade. The match between Lee and Sheamus with Drew on commentary was really fun, with both showcasing their physicality and telling a solid in-ring story of Lee's arm being worked over. The ending sequence was also pretty good, with Sheamus attempting headbutts on Lee before Lee responded in kind, hitting Grizzly Magnum and the Spirit Bomb for the win. So Lee will face Drew next week for the WWE Championship on Legends Night. Oh, Legends Night. Late December 2020. What a very special time for me, as I remember Legends Night. Lee gets another shot at the WWE Championship, and yet again, I don't think he's going to win. I think there will be a title change, though, after the events of the rest of the episode. Former Money in the Bank holder The Miz faced Grand Metalik next in what was actually a pretty good bout. I say this every time Grand Metalik is in the ring, but he's really, really good. The story of the match was solid, with Miz not having his head in the game following his failed cash-in at TLC, which led to him losing via roll-up. But it wasn't all doom and gloom for him, as later in the show, definitely not the GM Adam Pearce found him and Morrison on the stairs and told him Miz was right. He was the Money in the Bank holder, not Morrison, so Morrison couldn't cash it in on his behalf. As such, he was still the Money in the Bank holder, and he gave him the briefcase back, to which Miz and Morrison celebrated for way too long, dancing down the stairs. Well, this seems wholly unnecessary. I'm worried that with the WWE Championship match next week, and with Sheamus floating around, there could be ample opportunity for Miz to cash in and win the belt. In all fairness, if Lee won the belt only for Sheamus to attack him after the bell and Miz cashed in on Lee, that might be a fun story to explore, but it involves Miz being WWE Champion, which right now is not something I want to see. Dana Brooke with Mandy Rose at ringside faced Shayna Baszler next without Nia Jax at ringside. Okay. which Baszler won after a fun but short match with a near fall for Brooke that I actually bought into. But Baszler beat up Mandy Rose, Dana Brooke, and then Mandy Rose again to stand tall. After a couple of backstage segments in which Elias and Jackson Ryker were interrupted by Omos and AJ Styles, Elias and Styles faced off in a match. It's an odd heel versus heel dynamic, and I'm not entirely sure why we got this. They also got quite a bit of time on the match, and while I've not been a huge fan of Elias's in-ring work, he did pretty well in the match, though he was against AJ Styles, who can make anyone look good. AJ eventually won clean with a phenomenal forearm. Why did any of this happen? Ricochet faced Mustafa Ali next, and will Ricochet join the group? No. Still. There was a nice moment in this match where all of Retribution got involved and Ricochet was single-handedly taking them all out, which made him look great, but then he tried to hit a shooting star press on Ali, who got his knees up and made him tap with the Koji clutch. Ali tried to coax Ricochet to join, and Ricochet said he will not join Retribution. Sick swerve, mate. He hit the recoil on Ali and scampered away, so this feud must continue.
Caruso alert!
Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler both entered themselves into the Women's Royal Rumble because they kind of have to, they need 30 women for the match, before we got Charlotte Flair versus Nia Jax, but this time Shayna was at ringside with Jax while Asuka was at ringside with Flair. The match was fine, with Jax being dominated early on before coming back and working over Flair. After everyone on the outside got physical, Flair locked in the figure 4 but won via DQ when Baszler locked in the Kirifuda clutch on her.
Caruso alert!
Angel Garza's back and he tried to hand Caruso a rose backstage, but the 24/7 title picture ruined it. Glad he's one of the underutilized talents that can shine if given a chance, isn't that right, WrestleVotes? The New Day, Riddle, and Jeff Hardy face the Hurt Business next, with the Face Foursome coming up with names for their team such as Positively Hard Bros, which was on the verge of being goofy, but I found it entertaining. This match was really fun, with some insanely fast-paced action towards the end, with spot after spot after spot. It all culminated in Lashley tapping out Hardy with the Hurt Lock, before Riddle got a sneak attack on Lashley to initiate their feud for the US title. Solid stuff. After an Alexa's Playground segment earlier in the night, where Randy Orton instead invaded the Firefly Funhouse set and beat up some dolls, we got the main event segment with Alexa and Orton. Alexa came out and handed Orton some gasoline and matches, and asked him to burn her like he did to The Fiend. She lay down in the ring, waiting. She poured a circle around her. She poured a line up to him and waited. And still Orton did nothing. She yelled at him, half crying that he wouldn't do it because he's a little bitch. She said the fated B word, so Orton got fired up, asking her if she really thought he wouldn't do it. Orton, you already killed one person, you don't need to add to your tally. But before he could do it, the lights began to cut out. As it went into darkness, Orton was illuminated with the match he lit, holding it in front of him. Is he gonna do it? We'll never know, because then the show ended. Tune into Raw Talk, I guess, with Charlie Caruso and R-Truth, where they won't acknowledge anything that just happened and the ring will be completely clear. This sort of cliffhanger ending works really well for episodic TV, where the timeline doesn't follow in real time, because next episode we can start off exactly where this episode ended. But that doesn't work for WWE, because our time and their time is one and the same. So now we just don't know whether he did it or not, but probably not, because there would have been a lot of fire in the ring behind Charlie and Truth on Raw Talk. Look, I get what they were trying to do, but it just doesn't work for WWE. It's just like the ending for Hell in a Cell, with Drew McIntyre slamming the cell door shut. That's a really cool ending for a TV show where the next episode begins with McIntyre versus Orton in the cell where they left off. But time progresses, which means they can't effectively do these cliffhanger endings. So that was the show. Let me know what you thought in the comments, because I'll be replying to people from out of nowhere. And make sure to follow us on Twitter to vote in a poll on a poll match, where 53.8% of you thought this was a good show, with 20.8% going lower with poor. I'm somewhere in the middle. There were good bits on this show, and there were bad bits. Nothing was overly amazing or overly terrible. Everything was just solid. I'd rate this show Good, but only by Raw's really poor standards as of late. The wrestling world has paid tribute to the late Brodie Lee. Press the video to the right to find out more, and press the video below that to check out the Best of WrestleTalk 2020 compilation on Wrestle2. There might also be some Best of Quizzlemania highlights coming too, so subscribe and enable notifications over on Wrestle2 as well. I've been Corporate Chopper. Jam that jam.